Welcome. My name is Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. Matter is a healthcare incubator and innovation hub built on a belief that collaboration between entrepreneurs and industry leaders is the best way to develop healthcare solutions. Today, we have one of our signature programs, Tales from the Trenches, where we talk with seasoned entrepreneurs about their journeys. How did they get started? What are they trying to accomplish? What have they learned along the way? It's a series that we produce with Village MD, which is a Chicago-based company innovating in value-based care. Our guest today is Michael Davidson. Dr. Davidson is the CEO of New Amsterdam Pharma. He's also a professor of medicine and director of the lipid clinic at the University of Chicago. He's had a really incredible career so far as a physician, an academic, and an entrepreneur. He's a leading expert in the field of lipidology, having conducted more than 1,000 clinical trials, published more than 300 articles, and written 3 books on the topic. He founded the Chicago Center for Clinical Research, which became the largest investigator site in the US, and was acquired by PPD in 1996. He co-founded Thera Pharmaceuticals in 2008, which he took public and then was acquired by AstraZeneca in 2013. And he founded Corvidia Therapeutics, which was acquired earlier this year by NovoNordisk. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today for this program. Our moderator today will be Nancy Sullivan, who is the CEO and Managing Director of Illinois Ventures. Illinois Ventures is an early stage VC fund investing in therapeutics, devices, and other high-tech companies. Since the inception of the firm, they've invested in just under 100 companies, including several Matter members. Nancy also helped create Matter. She's served on our board of directors since before we opened. I will turn things over to Nancy and Michael to lead this conversation.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. Dr. Davidson, it's a pleasure to see you this morning. Thank you for joining us, taking time out of your schedule, and spending a little bit of time with our Matter community to talk about your road to entrepreneurship is how I'd like to frame it. But I always find the road to entrepreneurship and, quite honestly, success has many fathers, has many people involved, and the background to it is just as interesting as the process. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start this morning and spend a little bit of time talking about the background piece to this. And you and I had a chance to chat before this call. And one of the things that really came through is you live by a philosophy. And I'm not sure you frame it this way, but I took away, you don't go it alone, family matters, network builds opportunities, and at the end of every email you send, there's a quote. And the quote is, things turn out best for people who make the best of the way things turn out. Do you mind just sharing with the audience a little bit of who's been with you, how you got here, and why you care, and there's so much passion for what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nancy. It's really a pleasure to talk about the journey. For me, it is always personal. I lost my father when he was 47. I was 16. I became a cardiologist because of that, and I've always been interested in prevention of heart disease. And so when I started, the Chicago Center for Clinical Research, it was really to help develop new therapies. And I was very fortunate that I was right at the cutting edge of the new lipid drugs called statins. I was one of the very first to investigate those drugs, and that was the obviously very successful class of therapies for preventing heart disease. And then as involved in the Chicago Center for Clinical Research is a great organization. I think many people around the city had worked there, been there, gone on to do great things in their career. So it was a wonderful place to start and to work. And then as time went on, I realized I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be part of developing new therapies myself. Instead of being the investigator, I wanted to actually be the one who develops the new drugs. And that led to Thera. which was a novel omega-3 drug, which then led to the IPO and then acquired by AstraZeneca. And then after that success, I wanted to really keep going. And one of the new areas that for me that was the most exciting was looking at inflammation and heart disease, and that was Corvidia. So it's really trying to understand what's going to be in the future and how we continue to reduce cardiovascular risk, because it has many unfortunate potential causes, and therefore a lot of important therapies need to be developed to address all the root causes of cardiovascular disease. And so that's been my passion and why I feel so strongly about it. So it really helps you when you have to go through all the ups and downs of biotech company formation, that you have a strong belief in what you're doing and how to get to the finish line of success in developing these therapies for patients.
You had a passion from a pivotal event in your life to work on this and start it as a clinician. And in the bio, did I read 1,000 clinical trials you conducted? That goes beyond passion, I would say.
Right. Well, it was a lot of studies, people that worked there. We had 100 people. We had 100 trials at a time at least. And so it was a busy place for doing these studies. And we did it for, 20 years or so. So it was exciting because we were always working on something new. And for me, that has always been part of my, DNA, trying to figure out the next therapy that can make a difference in reducing cardiovascular disease risk.
You also talked a little bit before we go into some of the companies and all of the pieces that came together. I recognize for our entrepreneurs on the call today and for yourself, everyone has 24 hours in a day. We're talking about 3 startups, 2 successfully sold, 1,000 clinical trials, running a center at the University of Chicago. How do you do it all? And what's been your support system through this as our own entrepreneurs try and think about how do they juggle all of this?
Yeah. Well, a very supportive wife. That's a big part of it. Yeah, that's something she's always been, kind of takes care of everything else. And I'm very lucky about that, because I have to worry about the family issues and all that stuff. She takes care of everything for me. So that's really helped. And not everybody is blessed with that type of situation, but I would say I do like to put family. I do like to put family as the top priority, and so making sure we have that time with the family, and ultimately it makes the difference for everybody. Your life is, if you're a happy person in your family, you're going to be a lot more successful in your entrepreneurial endeavors too, because they go hand in hand, and so you have to, and I've always been that way as a head of a biotech company, that we make sure that family time is treasured and make sure it's carved out, and you don't have to worry about that when you're coming to, everyone tends to work so hard anyway, but we have to make sure we do have time for family. Is one of the critical lessons that I've always had in my career.
And one of the things we move maybe into some of the lessons learned into that entrepreneurial state a bit. The journey always seems simple when the success is at the end. But for those who are on that journey, maybe hearing a little bit about the ups and the downs, and maybe even starting with Thera back in 2013 as you served as the chief medical officer there. How did you get engaged with Thera? And then ultimately, when you look at sort of this acquisition by AstraZeneca, how did that happen? How do those things come together? People working on therapeutics are always looking for ways to connect with large pharma.
Right. So Thera, well, I was my very first research when I was a cardiology fellow was on omega-3s, fish oils for heart disease and triglyceride lowering. So I had this background. And then when I was working at Chicago Center, a company that had an omega-3 drug, they were trying to study it for Crohn's disease, and it failed phase 3. And they wanted me to help them repurpose it for cardiovascular disease and triglyceride reduction. So after working with them for a while, I said, why don't you let me license it and take it forward myself with venture capital backing? And so they said, sure, no one else is biting, for working with us. So I was able to license it out. I brought in a colleague from Merck that I knew. That's the importance of networking, having the right people to work with. I knew I know at the time I was not I didn't have a C. I have a CEO. I was chief executive officer of Chicago Center, but not of a biotech company. And I knew the investors would want like a seasoned business person to be the CEO. So one lesson learned there was, don't let your ego not drive you to be like, hey, you have to be the CEO. You can still be a founder, especially if you're a scientist or physician or clinician, and then you can still play an important role. So we were co-founders then, and I brought Jerry Whistler on, and he helped me raise the money from venture capital, and then that led to the success. So I think we had a lot of ups and downs, though. It was not an easy ride. It was a roller coaster. I just want, and the difference between success and failure was extremely small. We had many times where we thought it was over for us. We got our clinical data, it did not look what we hoped for. We were able to make it look better. And then to your point, and one of the really exciting things was when I was part of my academic hat, I was introduced to the CEO of AstraZeneca, not because of Thera, because of my role in academia. And I was able to let him know about Thera, and then that started the conversation about how to ultimately acquire us after the IPO. So it really was keeping your network as far as where making sure that you do connect with as many people as possible. Because a friend of mine who referred me to this meeting, and that led to the ultimate acquisition of AstraZeneca in 2013.
Let me ask you a question, because people in my world, when we work with folks like yourself, we're always worried you have too much going on. You're not going to focus enough on the company we're investing in. What did your venture folks think about you staying involved in so many things, ultimately one of which led to a very successful exit? But on the front end, what were their thoughts and how were they reacting to that?
Yeah, that was actually a big issue, because they said, you can't do this, you can't do that. We don't want you to do this. We don't want you to do that. You have to be. We want you to be out there as Michael Davidson, chief medical officer of Thera, not Michael Davidson, consultant to every company out there and that kind of thing. So we had to find the right balance. And so we worked it out. And this is one example where, this is one of the things I would say, I got to go to this meeting with the AstraZeneca CEO. It makes a lot of sense. They agreed. And so it worked out, but you do have to get those things up front. I do find that venture capital in particular are very worried about this issue, that if you're going to be the CEO or some C-level position, they do want you to make sure that you're fully dedicated to the company. And if you do have a lot of other activities, you have to pretty much explain how those help the company directly or curtail them to a significant degree. And it's finding the right balance. It's not always easy to come by, but it's best if you're transparent and you talk about it with them, and they can, and then you're cooperative too. Because I've seen physicians like myself in academia in particular, where they want to keep all their fingers in everything, and it doesn't work out very well at the end. It really is important to be focused and have a few things that are important to the company, but you got to make sure it's the right type of activities that make a difference for the company.
And let me just ask you, as you talked about that roller coaster ride, and maybe at times being so close to closing, and then everyone forgets about that and hears about the success. But those of us on the call today who are living it, and especially during this time, we're living in strange times. For some companies, COVID is making it very difficult for them. Do you mind just spending a little bit of time giving us one of those low moments from Thera, and then the high moment? So the best and the worst. So those going through the roller coaster have something to look at and understand they're not alone. This happens to many.
Right. Well, the real low was when we got our first clinical data back for our phase 3 trial, and it was and we were actually, the plan was to go IPO as soon as that, actually to have that IPO as soon as the data came out, and we would go on the road with that data. And the data was on the surface disappointing, and so we basically postponed everything. Waited for the next study, which was a little bit better. But what I was able to do was to show that the data was, the reason why the data wasn't as good as we had expected, what the issues were and how we overcame that was important. So I think that ultimately that convinced AstraZeneca and our IPO investors that we had a good drug and move forward. But it was a real low. We really felt that we were kind of, we were basically, we didn't have a path forward. And so that's when I felt was one of the biggest things that I brought to the company, was figuring out how to get the data to look a lot better. We called it your baby was born with blemishes, and we figured out how to make the baby look a lot better. You
put the bow on the baby, huh?
Right. It was, put the bow on the baby. And I think when you have data, clinical data in particular, it's never as good as you. And I think lessons learned is it may not ever be as good as you hope it's going to be. And I think what I learned from that was just be prepared for how to make sure you have all the everything right to look at effectively at the time. And I was able to plan a little bit scenario planning on how to make that more effectively considered for the ultimate acquisition by AstraZeneca. So that was our low, and we came out. And then the other low was we had a dual process, and we were trying to get acquired, and basically we went to 10 companies. Everybody said no. Everyone said no. Then the IPO was a tough one because we had obviously the data was good, but it was not stellar. We then went out and we were below our range. We wanted to go out at 12, and we got out at 9, which was below the range. We raised the money, and we thought we struggled, and the stock was weak at the opening. But then right before IPO, actually, we got a call from the CEO of AstraZeneca, called me and said, "We'd like to buy you. We'd like to buy you." But we said, "We have an IPO. The money is in the bank. What are we supposed to do?" And he says, "Well, we'd like you not to go public." But we debated it. We figured out, that we should still go public just in case something falls apart. So we went public, and we kept everything under wraps. And then we got acquired, 6 weeks later by AstraZeneca. But it was just keeping in touch and then battling it out, with trying to get our data to look as good as possible to an investor and to a big pharma company it's never easy, but we were able to get them to feel comfortable with acquiring the drug. That's how it all played out. We had a lot of lows. It was a roller coaster along the way, and never knew what was going to happen until the final acquisition time.
What made you stick it in during the lows? Instead of saying, "Hey, I've got another full-time job. This is life short. I've got a family." What makes you stick it in during those times?
Well, you said it was the motto. People do the best, make the best with the way things work out. I've had that since then. I mean, ever since then. And so it was you never give up. It's like I said, it's biotech's a full contact sport. You play to the end, and persistence pays off. It's never you never know what's you're gonna get thrown your way, because there's so many different aspects to it, and everything. From Thera was particularly challenging. We had the science part, we had the regulatory, we had manufacturing issues, we had IP concerns. So every aspect of biotech, we had to face hurdles along the way that we end up getting to the finish line, but it wasn't easy.
I have a question from the audience that I'm going to frame a little bit for you as it relates to what we see is a number of companies today in various industries helping pharmaceutical companies who are in trials find the patients that are right for their trial. So making sure you design your trial correctly, you pick the right patient population. When you came out of this and helped the FDA see the data as it was and helping them frame why it may not have been as bad as it looked at face value, can you tell us a little bit about how that was and how that came together?
Right. So, I mean, there's data is, there's this thing in academia, even you torture the data until it confesses. I mean, but that's not exactly, it doesn't work in the biotech world as well. And I think people are very smart. They can see through things very easily, and they know this is what people do. So you have to be very, very transparent in what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think that's what really makes a difference. So I would say that when you are, assessing, your data. Again, it's getting down into the weeds a little bit, maybe too much, but try to do the best you can to prepare for how the data could look like, and how to make sure your statistical models are already pre-specified, and how you can really make sure that you thought through how things could play out, good or bad, and then be prepared to build upon that, whatever the outcome may be. And I know that's easier said than done, but lots of time it's really important to be as prepared as you can to understand how the data could be managed and developed, and make sure you're transparent about it and how you analyze it going forward. It's really important, because if in the biotech world, if they think you're being not transparent, it really can hurt you a lot, and that sticks with you forever. So that's a really important lesson. Don't try to fool anybody, because it doesn't work.
So now I'm going to keep moving along your trajectory in sort of your entrepreneurial career. You come off on Thera, you take it public, and Corvidia is your next company. And it just so happens to be a spin out of AstraZeneca. Talk to us a little bit about how you use that network, those relationships, and how that came about.
Well, it's a direct connection, because obviously AstraZeneca bought Thera, and I got to know the CEO. He's very much this Pascal Soriot. He's a scientist. He's one of the CEOs that I met a number of CEOs of pharma companies. What I really liked about him more than anything else is he has a great grasp of science, and he's got a lot of gut instinct. He goes a lot on his gut instincts on how to make decisions. And so I think he realized that he has assets sitting on the shelf, and I said there's got to be assets sitting on the shelf that we can potentially utilize for a new company spin outs. And he agreed, and he actually, I don't know if I should say this or not, but he believes that R&D efficiency, once you get above 30 people, you lose efficiency, and so big companies struggle with this quite a bit.
We hear that quite a bit, to be honest.
Yeah. And so I think that he believed that putting an asset that's now no longer prioritized in the hands of a small company could be a really valuable place to put it, as opposed to trying to license it out to another big company and hope for future royalties or milestones. And another big company is going to struggle with the same issues as AstraZeneca would. So we identified a few assets that we thought were really looked through all their list of drugs on the shelf, and we found this one. We found ziltivekimab, ended up being an IL-6 inhibitor, interleukin-6 for inflammation. It was being developed for rheumatoid arthritis. It had gone through phase 1. So for me, if you look at my history, what I like to find is drugs already been in the clinic. They've already been into humans, and that makes a difference from a risk perspective. The preclinical great studies are all often exciting, but until you get to the human data, you may not. It takes a long time, and you may not have all the regulatory and safety and toxicology stuff you need. I wanted to make sure that we had that already de-risked from an asset perspective, and so we set it on this drug, and it turns out there was a team within AstraZeneca that was also eager to spin this out, and so we teamed up and started Corvidia. So it was just good confluence of people coming together to make this drug get right into the clinic with venture. I went back to the same venture capital groups that I had worked with before, because they had been successful, and it worked out well for everybody. It was the biggest. So Sullivan Partners, based in Paris, this was their biggest return ever, was Corvidia. So between the two, Thera and Corvidia, was their two biggest wins in their VC history.
Did I see NovoNordisk acquired Corvidia for $2.1 billion with a B?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations. That's a labor of love driven by passion to get to an amazing outcome. But our audience is asking lots of questions, and it's getting pretty exciting here. And one of them goes back to your discussion of the assets you look for. So I always think you had Thera, you could have said, great, we've made our impact, I'm done. You went back at it again, but you had a very specific framework on what you're looking for. So they're asking, as an entrepreneur, are you interested more in phase 1 assets or drugs with the phase 2 proof of concept level of data when you think about what's the right fit?
Yeah, it depends. It depends for me. I think it depends. I mean, we're hearing that, so we would, obviously with getting to know all the venture capital investors around the country, around the world actually now, everyone has a little bit of a different view on this particular issue. Value is created every step of the way in the process. And so, I'm very comfortable with anything in the clinic. So phase 1 and beyond, to me is depending on what we're trying to go after. But I think for a lot of investors now, what I'm hearing is they have plenty of preclinical assets in their portfolios, and so they are looking for beyond phase 2 now for proof of concept already established. And so then as long as the regulatory path looks reasonable, I think you have a good chance of getting funded. I mean, if you have a good proof of concept phase 2, regulatory path that makes sense, good commercial story, good manufacturing. Again, all the aspects have to be there. It's never easy, but you can get the investors to come on board. And I think one of the things that people should know that are listening is that I don't think we've never, in my experience now, I've been doing this for 10 years. This has never been a better time for biotech investment. The money is there. The money is there. A lot of these VCs are very well funded now. A lot of them have raised new funds, and obviously the market is really open for IPOs and so forth. So I think there's never been a better time to be in biotech from an investment perspective. If you have a clinical stage asset that looks promising, I think you're in good shape to find the right investors.
So this actually brings us to maybe a bridge, because we've got a physician, part-time student, and aspiring entrepreneur asking you a direct question, which is, did you find any drawbacks or have any issue in helping raise money and selling your idea to all players? So did you find your drawbacks being one, or did you have to get the help in the raising of the money? I think you have someone very interested in doing a path maybe similar to your own, figuring out raising that money, what drawbacks by being all of those people did you see, and what were the positives to it? Yeah,
so I would say with Thera, what I thought what made the difference was I didn't try to do the fundraising de novo myself. I brought in somebody who already had that experience and background, and so and that made all the difference in the world. And although I was the science guy, the medical guy, it was my therapy. He helped me on that critical phase of bringing in the first financing. So I think if you haven't had that experience before yourself, I would recommend you teaming up with somebody who does have that experience. After Thera, though, that was instrumental in Corvidia, now with my new company being one of the main fundraisers. So once you have that background experience and track record, it becomes a lot easier. But until you have that, I think you're better off teaming up with somebody who can provide that support for you, and then even whatever that role that person has, I would never let ego get in the way of having that person be perceived to be the business CEO person, because that's what sometimes when investors are looking for. They do see people that are involved in clinical practice or academia, and they really worry about whether they're going to be the right fit from a business perspective. And unless you can convince them otherwise, you're better off trying to team up with somebody who could be that business person for the investors. That's
Don't go it alone. So a team always makes it better, the right team, correct?
Right, yes.
We're going to take a quick step back to Thera from the audience, because I think someone has a bit of a personal question for you, which is regarding your earlier research. Was there any indication from the studies that fish oil helped Crohn's? So as you look at fish oil and Crohn's, if you could just give a member of our audience a little feedback on that.
Yeah, I think it didn't work in that study, 2 studies, but there were signals of benefit. And there's actually people working on better omega-3 derived therapies for inflammatory bowel disease. So that actually is something that people are working on now. I'm involved with that company as an advisor, but those are, I do think the anti-inflammatory aspect of omega-3s are quite important for Crohn's, for NASH, fatty liver disease, and actually even maybe for COVID now it's being evaluated. So there's the exciting aspects of that I think if somebody's interested in that area I think there's opportunities there. There's a lot of people involved with this now. There's multiple companies now looking at omega-3 derivatives for these type of indications.
Fantastic. And we're moving back a little bit between science and research and entrepreneurship. And you've been down many paths, and our audience wants to know, what career or business advice would you give someone with entrepreneurial spirit? Meaning, can you get into some of your biggest lessons learned? If you could do it all over again, what might you do differently?
Obviously I didn't take any business classes in medical school. And I was all kind of self-taught, and I still struggle with some of the financial, business issues that a balanced CEO would have in their career. So I would say that's one of the things that if you could have learn more about the business aspects of biotech, even if you're a scientist, that would help. The other would be really negotiating skills, because a big part of investors, one of the things that, some of the feedback that I got was don't do any negotiating. Let other people handle that, because I'm too nice a guy. And so try to be, if you had to learn, the two things I probably would have hoped to have more experience in is all the financial aspects and business aspects of running a company, and the other would be how to be a better negotiator, and I think that could have helped me. But that's, you're bringing the right people in that they can support you in those endeavors.
I have to tell you, this audience is really enjoying this conversation. The Q&A is running up, so I'm going to just keep with this. Dr. Davidson, they're very happy that you're willing to share your story today. Would you talk a little bit about possible opportunities for biotech in emerging markets as you see it? Do you see a growth path in emerging markets? And what do you think aspiring entrepreneurs should be paying attention to at this time in the biotech field, as you see it being a hot place right now?
Right. So yes, I think the emerging markets are an exciting opportunity, especially China. China has all kinds of complications, though. Usually you have to try to get some Chinese either investors or joint venture in place. The regulatory, but what's really exciting about China right now is that the government has earmarked this as an important initiative. They want to have an innovative, biomedical industries develop, and so they're trying to mimic, what U.S. and Europe has done in that regard. And so that's one exciting area, but it's complicated by how to work with the company there, understand the regulatory path, and so forth. India is still obviously a large country, great the generic companies. But they're struggling with getting the right regulatory formulas in place for entrepreneurial companies as of yet. And then Japan is always a tough market because of their regulatory requirements are a little bit tougher than other countries. But I would say if you can, and this is with Corvidia experience, when you can have a global development plan, not just U.S. or you're focused geographically on just one country, like U.S. is the biggest market, of course, but if you could always have a global view on how to develop your therapy, the better. And it requires a lot more thinking and a lot more understanding about how each geographic area is different. But as long as you can think about that ahead of time, even just getting regulatory input from different areas as you develop your therapy in the U.S., can be quite valuable to any potential acquirer or even other investments in the future.
Thank you for that. You've been very successful in growing companies. You've been very successful on the clinical side. You're talking at Matter, a hub for success of biotech in Chicago. And our audience is wondering, what do you think we need here locally to be a hub like Boston and California for biotech? What do you think would impact that in a positive way?
Well, it is disappointing for me that, I had my first company, Thera, was based in Princeton, New Jersey, and Corvidia was based in Boston. So I had to commute every week, which was not a lot of fun, time away from your family. So it was disappointing because the investors insisted that I wanted to be in Chicago, but they really wanted to go where the investors wanted the company to be, and for the first company it was New Jersey, because a lot of people were involved in New Jersey, and the other was Boston, which has the kind of the view that your more exciting science is in Boston. So there was this view by investors. I don't think it's quite as strong as it was then, but if you're a B company in Boston, you look more like an A+ company if you're based in Chicago. So that perception is there. I think it's gotten better, but it's still a perception. But I think most importantly, it's the investor community is to my knowledge, there are very few biotech investors in Chicago, and so we need to have the money here. Well, the ones I'm doing a Series A financing right now. I've talked to probably 30 biotech investors. Not a single one is in Chicago. So, and I think we have a great biomedical community, with Abbott, AbbVie, Takeda, Astellas, 5+ major academic centers. So we should do a lot better than we're doing. I think Chicago ranks 15th on the city list of biotech towns, if I'm not mistaken. It may have gotten better, but I think the most important thing we could do as a community is try to convince investors to be located here in Chicago and invest in Chicago-based companies. That would make a big difference.
Part of what we're starting to see a little bit, but it takes time and it's not overnight, is when we have people like yourselves, repeat entrepreneurs who have been very successful, investors start to get competitive, and the entrepreneur gets to make a few more requests after they've been successful. So we're always hoping, especially with some of our entrepreneurs, the next request is, we don't want to be the ones on the planes. Maybe it's your time to get on the plane, and encourage them. We're all working at it. So we'll keep wishing you good luck, and hopefully we'll find you some biotech investors in the area that can get in contact. We're going to go back maybe a little bit, still in the business side, and then we have some very technical questions for you. But we talked a little bit about this during our pre-call. What was it that piqued NovoNordisk's interest to do this acquisition, considering they're a diabetes company and an IL-6 target is novel to the treatment? And how did this tie-up happen?
Well, I think I had a relationship with NovoNordisk as an academic, career. Diabetes and heart disease are highly linked with each other, and so I had this relationship which helped. But one thing that was critical was we studied every pharma company, what their pipelines were, what their interest levels were, understanding what they might be interested in, and we knew that NovoNordisk was evaluating going beyond diabetes. They were actually tasked by their board to get to look out. Look now, they're always very internal. Everything in their pipeline was internally developed. And they had made the decision as a company to start looking at other external assets. And so that was good timing for us. And so it was a year ago at the European Society of Cardiology, I met with the business development people in cardiovascular, and we finally had a breakthrough with them. It was a one-on-one meeting with me and them, and we convinced them that we have a really novel therapy that fits very well into what they were thinking about, inflammation and heart disease. And ours was not only the right drug, but is the right target for what they're thinking about from a cardiovascular disease prevention. So with that breakthrough, which we could tell right at the meeting itself, we said we think we have a breakthrough here now with NovoNordisk, and led to a follow-up meeting in Copenhagen in December, and then a meeting at JP Morgan in January. And a deal was inked out, and then we had our data came out in May, which looked great. For the first time in my biotech career, we had data looked better than I was hoping. It looked great. I mean, it's always nice to have a surprise that's on the positive side. And so we got very fortunate, got into a bidding war between two major companies, and that's always a great thing to happen. And so
Did you just say a bidding war? Is that where we got the 2.1 billion outcome?
Yeah, you need a bidding war to get to those levels of.
Did you sharpen the negotiation skills during that time?
Well, it was not me. I can't take the credit, but it was we bought in a bank. JP Morgan came in.
That's fantastic.
And they did negotiating. So yeah, that's where the banks come in to be, I think, the most valuable is when you have two bidding parties in play. So it worked out for all of us.
I have a follow-up question to that. An exit to AstraZeneca right after going public, an exit where you had competition to NovoNordisk. How long was the process from the time you decided you wanted to see if you could find a strategic to the point that you actually reached an agreement and felt good about the exit? For our entrepreneurs who may go down this path, what was the time horizon on your end?
For both Thera and for Corvidia, it took over a year to go from getting the initial discussion to getting the license done. It took over a year. My new company, New Amsterdam, it's taken 2 years to get from license to actual company creation, get the license in place. So unfortunately, it takes a long time, and most companies are not really good at licensing out things. It's not done that often, really, to be honest. And so, but I think they're seeing successes like this that they may make it better going in the future. But just be prepared for a pretty long horizon for getting this done and being persistent and trying to work through all the ups and downs, because it does take a long time, unfortunately. There's no way around that, I think, to make it happen any faster.
Your audience is getting very perceptive with some questions. I like this one a lot. Did AstraZeneca want it back? And by chance, was AstraZeneca the second bidder? Do they have any rights of first refusal? My guess is you can't really answer these, but I think they're pretty poignant.
AstraZeneca always liked the data too, but it's really hard to just license something out and then want it back. I don't know if it's ever happened before, to my knowledge. Well, not in the cardiovascular space, but yeah, I think they really, obviously they were a 20% owner in the company, so they did well too from the beginning. So they were on our board, and so it was a great outcome for them as well. I mean, to have that happen. So that's why I think for big pharma companies, if you do have things sitting on the shelf, and don't be that hesitant to give them out to biotech. I think we can make them valuable for them more so than their own internal groups that may not have the right focus or interest in making those things happen.
A great point, Michael. And there's a couple of questions that have been around for a little bit, and I'm going to put them out there. They don't flow in perfectly, but they're important based on your expertise. And there are therapies out there in the immune system modulating space that have been coming online, and the FDA has been fast tracking such drug categories. Do you see this continuing to accelerate development in the future for similar drugs, and breakthrough status being something that could be awarded when you think about immune system modulators?
I think it's a complicated question because it's very different for a lot of different things. But I think that for heart disease, what's exciting here is that if you look at for any drug for heart disease, what you like to see genomic validation now, and genomic validation is using Mendelian randomization, which is looking at different gene polymorphism in large, huge databases like the UK Biobank, for example, which has millions of people in there. You can see whether your drug target has a benefit before you go into the clinic now. And so that was with our drug IL-6, that was validated genomically, which is critical now for any cardiovascular drug. And then you have to have preclinical data, and of course any clinical validation going forward is helpful. So when you think about the three pillars, you know, genomic validation, preclinical data, and then clinical supportive data, that was what led to success with Corvidia. We had the three pillars there to convince, you know, NovoNordisk we had the right drug and the right target for going forward with a large acquisition.
I've got one more audience question I'm going to ask before we spend our final 10 minutes looking at what's new for you now, what you're working on. So let me go ahead and ask our final audience question, and it's specific to the future of clinical trials. It looks like going forward, they may be more decentralized. The technology platforms might be more direct to patients, and home health visits versus going into the clinic side could become the norm. Would you agree? And what do you think is a good thing about this happening? Do you think that is the trend, and do you like that trend?
Oh yeah, of course the trend is, I mean, that, and with my new company, that's what we're hoping to do. But this is especially true for cardiovascular drug development, because one of the things that we've heard all along, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to do these outcome studies, these large, you know, 10,000 plus patient trials, and you go to CROs and they give you sticker shock because it requires tremendous amount of dollars to get these studies done. And so so most biotech companies are not cardiovascular for that reason, because these studies are so expensive, they take so long, and a lot of biotech investors don't want to wait 4 or 5 years for a readout. And that was what with Corvidia, we struggled with that quite a bit. We were hoping to do an IPO, but the feedback we got was we need to have that outcome study, that $150 million outcome study, kind of pre-funded before no one wanted the financial overhang for us to invest in. So it's kind of the catch-22. You know, how do you get the money and have this overhang as well? And so I think what's really the future then is exactly what this person asked, is how do we make these trials a lot less costly? And the FDA is supportive of this. It's not an FDA issue. Companies have to change, you know, what the requirements about what they want to see and do for cardiovascular outcome, or any trial for that matter, and have just collect the important things, do risk-based monitoring, reduce the amount of visits that are to the different investigative sites, you know, try to make them more home-based or more Zoom-based, or however you want to make these studies, you know, more cost-effective. But I think the regulatory bodies are okay with it, and it's just a matter of just figuring out how to make sure we keep up the rigor that's needed for these trials, but do it in a much more cost-effective way. And that's the future. We have to get there, and I think new technology is going to make a difference in how that can be most effectively applied in making these drugs, you know, much more cost-effective to develop.
So you decided not to rest very much after Corvida's exit, from what I can tell, and you're already on to the next one. It's you alluded to it in our opening, New Amsterdam Pharma. Tell us about it. Tell us your vision and your passion.
Well, so it's a drug that was developed by Mitsubishi in Japan. It was then developed by a biotech company based out of Amsterdam called Zima. It was acquired by Amgen for $300 million and $1 billion in milestones. And now Amgen, for business reasons, decided not to go forward with the drug. So we basically got it back after this 2-year negotiation. But it fits my model. It's a clinical drug already through phase 2B, proof of concept, you know, a great drug. But for me personally, in 1994, this class of drug, I was with my first patent that I filed in 1994 on what's called CETP, cholesterol ester transfer protein for cholesterol benefit or reducing heart disease risk. So it's full circle for me. I've always believed in the target. It's been a rocky course for this class of drugs, but we do believe we have the right drug and we have the right development plan, and I think we can get the right team of investors to make this happen. So it's just that it was, for me, it's a cholesterol drug, which has been, you know, again, my strength and passion for 30 plus years. And so I wanted to be, I'm honored they asked me to be the CEO, and I wanted to this is something I thought had a lot of value for patients, and I'd like to close out my career with this drug and with this company and with this team. And my wife, I did tell my promise wife this was the last one. So it's getting there. So, but I'm excited about this opportunity to to bring another new cholesterol drug to market. And I think there's a lot of unmet need here that could make a difference.
So I want to ask you, in your own quote that you have, which are things turn out best for the people who make the best of the way things turn out, how are things going to turn out? What's happening for you?
Yeah, of course. The new, I'm very, this one, I don't want to jinx anything, but I feel this is the one I think has been the easiest so far to fundraise for. I think the regulatory path is the most clear cut. I feel really good about the drug itself, so I'm convinced it's going to be very successful, going forward.
And when you think back on the opportunities you've had and staying very close to the clinic, what's some of your best memories with your patients as you take some of these drugs forward?
Right. So that to me, we didn't talk about this yet, but I still see patients 3 to 4 days a month at University of Chicago, and that's always been my part of my DNA, seeing patients, listening to patients, understanding what their issues are. And that's why I'm excited about this particular company, because I know a lot of people can't take statins, for example. That's something, unless you're in practice, not in like an Ivy Tower situation where you don't really interact with patients that much. But for me, interacting with patients, finding out what the unmet needs are, hearing their issues, makes all the difference in the world. And so I think about them all the time when it comes to how to develop these new therapies. And so that's again, part of my incentive and rationale for going forward with another company. I think it's definitely a need that out there for patients that struggle with how to best reduce their risk for heart disease.
I think that's what sometimes we lose. It's the conversation of the big name companies, the big exits, the amazing entrepreneurial journey of all that you've done, but your commitment that's ongoing to patients on the clinical side, and the passion of what you have. And in the conversation I had for you, that came through so clearly. So I'm glad we were able to end on the note of what really is of most drive for you, which is still seeing patients and engaging with your patients. Dr. Davidson, I want to say thank you so much for taking time, talking with us. Our audience today was deeply engaged in our conversation. You clearly brought together a group of people interested in entrepreneurship, biotechnology, and really a unique road that you've taken and what you've been able to do in your career and what you looked at in life. So I'm going to give you 2 more closing minutes for us as you want to just talk to the community about what we should be thinking to support people like yourselves to be successful.
Sure. Well, Nancy, this has been great for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my journey. I do think that I feel very fortunate, and I always believe that the difference between success and failure is very small. Actually, things could have easily gone the wrong way in every single thing that I've done, and so I just feel blessed that it all worked out. So I think good fortune is always a positive, but on the work side, I mean, I think you do have to roll with the punches. You have to be persistent. You have to always be confident. And if one thing blocks your way, try to figure a way around it. Don't give up. And knowing that what you're doing is really important, because I mean, I can't think of any area to be in a business role that's better than being in biotech. I mean, you're really you're translating science into something useful, and that's the best translational research anybody can have. And when I talk to academic colleagues about that, and they wonder, okay, you went to the dark side, you went to biotech. I never feel that way. I never think of it the dark side. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. We're the ones that are really translating the science into something useful for patients, and no one else really does it the way we do it, or can make it happen. I think big pharma companies struggle because of the bureaucracy and how to work through those large kind of issues. I think the only thing about biotech I would say is, yes, you have a lot of freedom. You can be very effective. You're your own champion or master of your own time, but you still spend half your time raising money. But the other half the time you can be very productive. And I think that just if you think about what you're going to be able to do I think I think of no better, no better profession to be in, and to be in the biotech business, because it's something that makes a difference every day for patients out there, which I can see on a personal level.
Well, Michael, thank you for your time. A thank you to everyone who joined us today, and a special thanks to Matter for bringing us together. I look forward to staying in touch, and everyone, please continue to help build our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.